Welcome to our study in the book of the Revelation of Jesus Christ. I'm Dick Baker, your teacher. This is a special insert lesson that belongs just about in the middle of chapter 7 that we've looked at. In chapter 7, the first 8 verses, it talks about the 144,000, 12,000 from each of the 12 tribes of Israel. And the reason we call this the lost tribes of Israel is because even today, many of God's people, the Jews, do not know their ancestry, do not know what tribe they are from. They know they're Israelites, they know they're Jews, they know they are in the land that God has given them. But so the question always arises then, well, how in the world are we reading in Revelation that they know? That's what we're going to share with you today. And I think you're going to learn a few things and get surprised on some also. That we're going to go back to the past and how they got lost. And then we're going to deal with where we are right now and some of the things that are going on. So what's in this chapter? Well, the location is in heaven. John's there and seeing and listening and speaking. And he's also writing the book of Revelation. And there's an interlude. And what by this I mean, it's just we need to stop and just pick up and catch in our mind that we've just finished the first 6 breakings of the seals of the scroll. And we're to that point right now, and it's because of that this gets to be spoken of. But understand, once a seal is broken and the judgment has fallen, it doesn't mean that the judgment's all cleaned up and everything's okay. And so there's 6 judgments going on planet Earth while this is happening here. So while we're looking at heaven, the location of the 144,000 is on earth. There are a great multitude saved during this tribulation, and we read about that with the 144,000 a little bit later on in some other and later chapter. And that's definitely in the tribulation and what goes on with them. So without saying a whole lot more, let's look at the lost tribes of Israel. The Assyrian Empire was a world empire for about 300 years, from 900 to 607 before Christ. They predate the Babylonian Empire. But understand, the Babylonians were a nation, but they were under the Assyrian Empire rule. Nineveh was its main capital. And if you want to take a look, the blue arrow points to Judah. Under the Assyrian Empire, they held this amount of land, and after they took the northern kingdom of Israel, that left Judah, and Judah never was conquered by the Assyrian Empire, but everything around them was. Quite interesting. And then the Assyrians had 3 capitals. And the northernmost one that you can see is Nineveh with the arrow pointing down. Depopulation was created by the Assyrians. What was that? Well, defeated enemies would be taken back to various cities of the empire as slaves, never to return home again. The vacant lands that were left would be available to other foreigners that the Assyrians would move into that land. Hence, any of the Israelites that were left, and they did leave some, would intermarry. And just because I'm not going to deal with it later on, that's where Samaria came from. Remember when Jesus walked the earth, the woman at the well, she was a Samaritan. She was intermingled marriage from who knows what other land. But she was part Jew. Okay, so the vacant lands would be available and people would move in. Assyria began its rise to world power about the time Israel became a divided nation after King Solomon died. If they had not divided, the Assyrians probably would have left them alone, and they could not have beaten them. The northern kingdom became the favorite target, though, of the Assyrians. Target in this sense because they're Syria, and the Assyrians, of course, controlled them. What they would do is they would come across the border, and they would take cattle that hit the farming communities, take what food they wanted, and if they needed slaves, they'd take people. And there was not enough people to gather together to fight them off, because they'd come at night, they'd come swiftly, and then disappear. But so would the people, or cattle, crops, things. It also set buildings on fire and burned them down. It gradually absorbed and destroyed the northern kingdom of Israel. Assyrian kings involved with Israel and Judah were, here's the list of them that were alive. And you can see when Jonah was written to the Assyrian Empire, Nineveh mainly, but that's where the king was. Nahum also wrote a follow-up letter of judgment coming upon them. So we need to put our attention to Tiglath-Pileser III. He's the fourth one down, and Sargon II, the sixth one down. And you'll see why in just a minute. So here's Israel and all the kings. The Assyrian Empire, they split after Solomon is on the throne between Rehoboam and Jeroboam, and shortly thereafter, the attacks to the perimeter tribes of Israel are taking place in the north. So here's Assyrian in the Bible. So here's Tiglath-Pileser III. He's called Pul in the Bible and Pulu in the Babylonian writings. And the deportation number 1 he's responsible for, and he's also deportation number 2. So he would come during these years, and he would be dealing with this, and this is the tail end of the empire. They pretty well were picked apart up to that point. And so he dealt with these corrupt kings, and they didn't much care. They couldn't do much about it. So deportation number 1, there's the overall view of the Assyrian Empire. The tribes located east of the Jordan River were the first ones conquered by Assyria. And I put blue arrows on them. Half tribe of Manasseh, Gad, and Reuben. Scripture tells us that in 1 Chronicles 5. So the God of Israel stirred up the spirit of Pul, king of Assyria, the spirit of Tiglath-Pileser, king of Assyria, and he took them into exile, namely the Reubenites, the Gadites, and the half tribe of Manasseh. So everything, and I'll back up to that map, everything on the east side of the Jordan River, the Sea of Galilee, then the Dead Sea down as far as Reuben. And the southern kingdom didn't really have the army to stop something of that massive attack. And so continuing on, though, in Scripture, it says, what did they do with them? And brought them to Hala, Habor, Hara, and the river Gozan to this day. Now, here's the problem with this. No one knows where these cities are. They've just guessed, and of course they've vanished. And so these became the first lost tribes of Israel, these 2.5. They just disappeared. Then Tiglath, or Pul, comes back again in 732 for number 2. In the time of Pekah, king of Israel, Tiglath-Pileser, king of Assyria, came and took Ijon, Abel-Beth-Maachah, Janoah, Kadesh, and Hazor. He took Gilead and Galilee, including all the land of Naphtali, and deported the people to Assyria. So once again, he took them out of there. So what we're talking about here, he took the tribe of Naphtali. Then he took the tribes like Issachar and Asher that are around the Galilean region, Zebulun, and the fortress city of Gilead, which was the furthest south that they took. So here's number 3, and it comes about by Sargon II, and the northern kingdom will be finished after this. They're gone. Hoshea was the last king, and they were no more. So we see the 3 deportations involved in 2 of the empire's kings, the Assyrian Empire. So the only mention in the Bible is Isaiah 21, verse 1, and this is the mention of the 3rd deportation. In the year that Tartan came unto Ashdod, when Sargon the king of Assyria sent him, and fought against Ashdod and took it. He completed the destruction of Samaria and the captivity of Israel. So, where are the last tribes? Well, we know in the first one we were given some names, and that river is still the same. It's still there. I don't know that it's changed direction much, but the river's there, but people only guess where those towns were. And there had to be more of them. And, of course, they would take some back to Nineveh and the other 2 capitals and just make slaves out of the people. And who knows what's done with them. We never read about them being allowed to come back. So let's share some things here real quick. We do know, here's what we do know. Some Jews from Ephraim, Manasseh, and Simeon fled to Judah. Okay, that means they went south and went to Judah that was never touched or taken by the Assyrians. Here, let me read. And he gathered all Judah and Benjamin and the strangers with them out of Ephraim and Manasseh and out of Simeon, for they fell to him out of Israel in abundance when they saw that the Lord his God was with him. Okay, number 2, some were spared by the Assyrians, up in Dan, Ephraim, Manasseh, Asher, and Zebulun. If you read 2 Chronicles 31 through 11, you will read of that. And you'll know that, hey, there's some people that got to stay back. Okay, and if that's the case, as long as they did not intermarry, but they married Jews upon Jews, they kept the line and the purity going. But that really didn't happen. Now we go to the New Testament and get this. Luke 2:36. And there was one Anna, a prophetess, the daughter of Phanuel, of the tribe of Asher. She was a great age and had lived with a husband 7 years from her virginity. Wow, in the time of Christ, here is somebody from the tribe of Asher, a woman. Then we go to James 1:1, and what an easy verse to remember. Most people know that that's James' introduction to his book, to the 12 tribes scattered among the nations. So even James knew while Christ was living, but when he wrote his book after Jesus had gone back to heaven, he writes this to the 12 tribes wherever they are. It's written to all Jews wherever you are, and his copies were made and they went out into the world. Undoubtedly, some read them, most not. Now we jump in time. 1948, Israel becomes a nation, and so Jews returning to the new nation of Israel claimed they were members of the lost tribe. Many of them that came when they showed up and they were coming through the newly established customs or the border said, we have no paperwork. We're Jews, we know that. But we don't know what tribe we're from. And of course they let them in, but that brought the Jews home, but they didn't know who they were. Now, where are they today? There's a couple of things that I share with you, and I close with this, and I think it's rather fascinating. And then I'll close with I'll close with something I've not mentioned yet. So here are the beliefs of where they are. Okay, some never were taken and stayed in the land, forming what would be called Samaria. We know that that happened. Okay, so we know that for a fact. All right, some other things that have come up, and they're very strange. Believe it or not, many believe that the Mormons are God's lost tribes of Israel. And here they are in the United States, most of them, many of them out in Utah, others are totally around the world. I don't think so. I don't think that's possible. Now, you have heard of ancestry DNA. A quick way to find out where you're from, what bloods you have, of peoples, of nations, and of what countries or geographic locations that once was another country of another country, but that we're looking at land populations. Okay, I could go to my drugstore and give them a DNA sample, and I could trace my ancestry, and I want to know my bloodlines too. And my German, I know I'm German, I know I'm English, there's a little bit of Irish in me, just because I know my grandparents. But where exactly did my grandparents' grandparents come from? See, that's what this produces. This traces families back to origins, mostly, of course, in Europe for Americans and or Africa, but in other places of the world. Now, this is what their site says and how they work, and let me just read it to you. Then I'm going to tell you what the Jews did. So this is Ancestry DNA, and that's registered. So this came off of their information sheet. They use advanced scientific techniques to produce your results. We measure and analyze a person's entire genome at over 700,000 locations. During the testing process, each DNA sample is held to a quality standard of at least 98% call rate. Any results that don't meet that standard may require a new DNA sample to be collected. So if they reach a dead end, or one of their testings just doesn't continue to come up to a 98% surety factor, they'll send back to the person and say, look, we need another DNA sample. Let's try it again. Then we compare your DNA to one of the most comprehensive and unique collections of DNA samples from people around the world to identify DNA similarities. So out of the DNA, they can match the similarities. They can start matching early communities and civilizations. As our database of DNA samples continues to grow, you could receive updates with new information. So they keep it, and I think that's rather interesting that they would do that. Now, the Jews took this technology, Israel did recently. This would go back, I know it's at least 2020, and maybe they started it before that, and I very well could figure that out. But they did exactly what this company had done, or similarities. They used the same techniques and a way to search, and this is where they've come up with, and where they've found that where there's a large in history way back, and we're going to be dealing with present day countries titles, not what the countries were before, but we would be dealing in that geographical location, that there was a large community or civilization of Jews, and they are of that tribe. So, you ready? Here we go. So, the tribe of Asher has a huge block, and did, of Jews from the tribe of Asher in South Africa. Dan shows up in Ireland. Gad is in Germany. Issachar Finland. Ephraim was the United Kingdom. Manasseh is the United States. Wow, now they're starting to change continents and hemispheres. Naphtali, Sweden. Reuben, France. If you notice, except for South Africa, they're over in the European areas. Simeon is scattered just everywhere. They can't put a finger on that one. Zebulun, Holland. And I can stop right there. That's as far as they have gotten with this. So, one thing I want to share with you that we looked at in Revelation 7, 4 through 10. Revival is coming. And here's what I said I'd share with you at the very end, is this. God doesn't need any Jews' DNA testing. He knows who every one of his people are and what tribe they came from. He knows everything about them. And I'm talking the ones that are living right now, or the ones that will be living when he calls 12,000 out of the 12 tribes of Israel. He already knows. And so I'll put my stake with the Lord, but this is rather fascinating, and I think there's a lot of accuracy in this. But so what does that mean? I don't know. As far as biblical perspective is, are they all coming home to Israel? No. Most of them, the report read that they pretty much are staying in their country. They're happy to do that. And how did they get so much over in Europe? Well, remember, they became lost. They intermarried. Babylon takes over. Then the Persian Empire takes over. Then Greece. Now we're into Europe. Alexander taking people and bringing them back to Europe. And right behind him was Rome, Italy. And Rome continued to do the same thing. Defeat countries, nations. They needed slaves to build the empire. So they'd bring them back to build the roads, the aqueducts. And that was all in Europe. Yes, some of it's down into the Holy Land, and they intended to do throughout the kingdom, but then they fell. So that's a little bit of history for you, and I hope that would be a blessing to you. And if you did not listen to chapter 7, it's right before this video that you're looking at right now and listening to. Then, of course, I would invite you to visit my playlist. You're watching my YouTube channel. And if you need any of the other lessons on Revelation, you'll find them in the playlist under, I think it's Revelation 2025. Then check I've got some other great books from the Word of God and some studies there, as well as Bible trivia quizzes and a thing called Americana. That's a lot of neat stuff about America. So I'm going to thank you, and guess what? Next stop is chapter 8, and I believe I hear trumpets getting ready to sound.